All right, so we're still in Chapter 7. I would expect that we're going to be done with Chapter 7 really soon, like as in today. Because we got halfway through it last time. So the return statement. In this language, as in C++ and Java, you can only return one value at a time. If you need to return more than one item at a time, you're going to want to pass the data in by reference instead, or pass your output in by reference instead. So if you were writing a method, you know, and it needed to pass back two values, right? Then, you know, call it change, and you take two values like that. I shouldn't use I and J. They look too close together. And then it could modify both of those. Then the calling code inside main could call change, you know, and it could pass in X and Y. And then it could use those values, right? So since return only returns one value, unlike Python, you have really two choices. Well, I guess you have three choices. You have an infinite number of choices. One, you could return an array. Like if you needed to return multiple lengths, you could create an array and return, you know, the array. You could create a class that holds, you know, enough variables to hold all your return values. Or lastly, you use as many reference variables. And the one time that we've seen reference variables is in the parse data. Except what did it use? It used the out keyword rather than ref. And that would work just as well. And I forget now, does the ref come before the int or after it? Okay. You're not going to tell me, are you? All right, well then I'm a chapter ahead, but that's okay. I still want you to know this. So among the things that you can pass in to an array, to a method is an array. And those are passed in by reference. By default, everything else is passed in by copy. But arrays are passed in by reference. Now it's kind of weird because it's actually passed in by copy, but what is being copied is a memory address, and so it still has access to the array as though it were passed in by reference. So if we wanted to create a method that would do something with an array, don't know what, it might calculate the sum of the entire array. You know, it just needs to take like that. And then when you call it, you would pass in an array variable. And inside here, there better be some kind of loop that, you know, declares a total variable, runs through it with a loop, adding to the total, and then returning it. So you can pass in an array just like you can pass in anything else. Since it is being passed by reference, or by pointer, really, behind the scenes, that means we can also change the elements of the array. So making a new project.
T.
We're on T, huh? You can tell what I'm about to do. Yep, CS Lecture T. All right, so let's declare an array so that we can pass it to a method. Right? Int, IA equals 1, 3, 2, 4. Like that. And we're going to write an array called add1, which takes the entire array and adds 1 to each value of it. Right, so it's going to look like this. Add1, and we're going to pass in IA. Pass in our array. Now we don't have the add1 method yet, so it's underlying it on mine. Then we're going to calculate the sum of all those numbers, or we're going to print them, right? Let's make a print method that accepts the integer array. And we could just as easily create one that was a summation of the array. All right, so he doesn't accept, we don't need a return value there, so he can be void. We don't need a return value there, so he can be void. We can make this method cooler by letting you specify how much you want every element to increase. Right? So if we want them to go up by 1, we do that. I think that'd be more interesting. So I'm going to come up here, and since we're in a static context, the methods have to be static. They're void because we're not storing any return value, right? If it was like that, then we'd have to be able to return something and we would not declare it as void. So public static void, or static public void, won't matter. Add, and it takes an integer array. I'm just going to call it A, because it's easy to type. Now, it'd be nice if we could use a for each loop rather than an index-based loop, but since we're changing the contents as we step through it, we can't use a for each loop. It's going to have to be an index-based loop. For each loops are great if you're only reading from the array, but if you're modifying it, you've got to use an index-based loop. Just a good old-fashioned for loop. So for parentheses int I equals 0, I is less than the length of the array, so add dot, where did I get add? A dot length, capital L, and then AI plus plus. Yeah. And I think I've done something wrong. Isn't it length with the parentheses in parentheses, or is it just a property? Dot length. Yeah. Okay. Parentheses in. No, it's just a property. All right. All right, and then let's take that array element and add something to it. Add the value to it. Now, I forgot that I wanted to make it so it could accept a second value, which was something that needed to be added to it. So, int delta, what are we going to change it by? I would use add again, but we've already used that as the name of the method. So, a subscript I in subscript plus equals delta. Not delegate, delta. Now for good programmers, we'll document what we're doing. Adds the amount specified in delta to each element of the array.
Should it be AI equals, oh no. Should it be delta plus AI?
You could do it either way. This is exactly the same thing as a variable of type integer. Right, so if we had int x equals 3, and you could have x plus equals delta, an element of the array is the exact same thing, so it's fair to do it that way. But if you like this syntax better because it's clearer, a subscript I equals a subscript I plus delta. That's clear, right? So I probably should have gone with that.
Okay, yeah, I just forgot my syntax.
Yeah. So that's fine. It's fine either way. Now let's write our method that will print the array. So that corrected that one. No more red underlines there. What type? What's the return type of this particular function? Does print need a return type? And I think Denise just started to say the answer before I talked.
It's void.
Yeah, it's going to be void. Yep. So static public void. It'd be okay not to make it public because we're not writing a second class that needs to call these, but why not? Print, parentheses, and it needs to be an array, int subscript a, int subscript. And it just needs to be a for loop. For each, parentheses, int, I like v, or value, in a, for each value in a. Just write it out. Console, tab, write the value out. I mean, we could pretty print it, right? We could make it go horizontal and, you know, whatever, but it's good enough. Why don't we put a message up here saying what we're doing? So CW tab, printing the array. So why didn't we stick a print message up here? CW tab, adding to each element in the array. Got to be as verbose as possible, right? All right, so those are our two methods. And they're not inside main. I put main underneath everything. Let's see if it runs. Except, as usual, I forgot to put my read line down at the bottom. So down here, after print IA, I'm going to put my usual comments. This is the end of main. That's the end of the class. And that's the end of the namespace. This helps me, keeps me on track. And this is console.readline. Except I keep typing something wrong. Console.readline. Cease in parentheses. And we could hit, you know, add, pressing the key to continue. CW tab, press enter to finish. All right, and it printed out the array. The contents of it was originally 1, 3, 2, 4. I guess we could have printed it out before we called add. Let's do that. I'm going to add one more print statement above the call to add so we can see the original array. Print parentheses, IA, in parentheses, semicolon. And there it goes. All right, so even though the chapter is not talking about it, we're going to go ahead and mention the ref parameter again. I know we've done it in a prior lecture, but I want to do it again. Are we good with what we've typed here, or do we need help? So if you actually needed to allocate a new array, passing the array in like this would not work. It's not good enough to do it that way. And the reason why is it really is still doing a pass by copy. And so it's getting a copy of the address of the array that's being passed in. But that doesn't mean that we can then set A equal to a new address. And don't type this, but if I did this right here, A equals, you know, new int subscript 5, that would not work. It would not modify A itself. So you can step through it and change the elements inside A, but you can't change it itself. If you want to do that, you make this a ref as well. And I don't really see why you need to do that, but there we go, right? Then we would be able to use the new value of A. You know, we'd be able to use our new brand new array. But typically, if people are going to do that, instead they make it just return an array. Right, so we don't really want to do that. Instead, we'd want to create a method that had a return type of int subscript, right, so that we could return the array. There's no reason to use the C# features that they give us too much, unless it just makes sense to you, because then if you try to take this code and port it to C++ or Java or something, then you're going to run into some places where that doesn't seem to make sense at all. Actually, C++ supports references, so you could do that. So let's write a method that lets us increment 3 variables we pass in. Not going to return anything, it's just to increment them. So it's going to be another static public void. It's going to be called increment. And it's going to take int out x, comma, int out y, comma, int out z. What are you doing?
Why not?
I did not.
Oh my.
Okay, sign into Skype. Sounds great. No, let's not do that. All right. I'm going crazy with the open braces and closed braces accidentally, so I'm going to clear out some of them. Out is a keyword. Out space int space x. All right, so the out or the ref keyword go before the data type. So it should say out int x and out int y and out int z. You don't like that name? X must be assigned before it leaves. So this is interesting. Since you're specifying that x is an out parameter, that it's a reference and an out, it has to be changed. It has to be set before this function will even let us compile. So x++, y++, z++. Now to stop complaining, the red underline under increment will go away, right? Control S. You gonna stop giving me this grief?
Oh, we're using X already.
Okay, I better just change these to refs rather than outs. Out means that you can't guarantee it has a value at all. So it's effectively an uninitialized variable. So let's change out each reference. Instead of ref int x, ref int y, ref int z, we're going to change into, excuse me, instead of out int, out int, out int, we're going to change it to ref int, ref int, ref int. And so inside main, we could declare 3 variables. Int a equals 10, comma, int, wait, a equals 10, comma, b equals 20, comma, c equals 30. And then we could call the increment. Increment, but we have to mention to it that these are references. And this is a difference between C++ and C#. In C++, you don't have to put the reference keyword down there. It's actually useful to have to, so that as we're writing it and looking at the code, we know, oh, by the way, this is one of those rare functions that can actually change the values of the parameters. Ref A, ref B, ref C. And if we printed those 3 guys out, we would then see that A is 11 and B is 21 and C is 31. So I am going to add a print statement here. CW, tab, tab. Increment 3 ints. But what if we wanted to increment some doubles? That's where overloading kicks in. Overloading is when you declare a method with the same name but a different parameter list. Or what if we only wanted to increment 2 variables rather than 3? We could write a version of increment that only accepted 2 variables. Let's do that rather than overload it with doubles, although doing it with doubles might be... Oh, I got a mistake down here. Ref. So to make my new version of it, I'm just going to copy this and delete the third parameter here. I'm going to copy and paste it. Make a new version of increment that only changes x and y. While we're at it, we're going to go crazy, copy both of these, and change all the ints to doubles. So copy those two methods. Oh, I need to change this where it says console.writeLine. Now we're only incrementing two ints. All right, so I'm going to copy both of those increment functions, paste them, and change the int to double, just so that I could pass in data of either kind. So this version is going to take doubles. Double x. Make sure you copied and pasted it before you made these changes. Double x, double y, double z. I'm going to change my little comment here. Increment 3 doubles. I'm going to do the same thing for the second thing down here. Ref double x, ref double y. And it's incrementing 2 doubles. And just to prove that works, we're going to go down to main and create a couple of doubles and call the version of increment that accepts doubles. So I'm going to scroll down a wee bit, make 2 doubles, double D, 1 equals 1.1, comma, D2 equals 2.2, semicolon, and then just call increment parentheses. Notice that the auto helper here, the IntelliSense, knows now that we've written 4 different versions of the function method. We've written 4 different versions of the method. We have overloaded it to accept 4 different parameter lists. That's the first one, where it takes 2 doubles. The second one is where it takes 2 ints. The third one is where it takes 3 doubles. And the fourth one is where it takes 3 ints. Well, we're just going to use the one that takes 2 doubles. D1, comma, D2. Right? You going to start working? Or are you underlined? Oh, what have I done wrong? Before I scroll down and show the rest of it, anybody see what I did wrong? Momentarily I pretended I was using C++ and I forgot something. I need to change this to convince it that I'm calling the function. What do I need to do? Well, if I scroll down, it's going to give the answer away. So somebody tell me. The problem is the parameters I'm listing here, but I need to add a keyword to indicate that it's compatible with this. REF. So that's what you use overloading for. It just kind of makes, you give yourself kind of a conceptual language that you can use in your program. And what do I mean by that? You're going to say, okay, I'm going to increment some variables, and then I'm going to increment some other variables. And in this particular case, we don't care whether we're incrementing ints or doubles. Now, if we didn't know how many variables we wanted to increment, it might be best to stick them into an array, right? And then change the values of the array, because an array can be of any length that you allocate. So another way of handling it when I need to pass back different values is I could create a structure or a class that had an X and a Y member, and then I could just have it return that, or I could pass that in, right, and let it change those. But that's doing a lot of work just to want to pass in a couple of variables and have it change their values. I don't know why the slides need to try to hammer this in, but I guess it's fine. Methods can return a bool as well as anything else, right? And so if it does return a bool, then you can use it inside an if statement. Like we could write something called is every element even. It's a bit clumsy, but you know, it could look like this. Is every element even, and then pass in an array there, right? And that function, that method is every element even, would need to return either true or false. So Boolean can be returned just as well as any other data type. Analyzing a built-in method. We know that math.pow is a static method because we use it with its class name rather than an object name, an object reference. We know that it accepts 2 doubles. Now if it had been written like this, right, then we wouldn't necessarily know that. But we certainly know that now. And we know that it returns a double, or something that can be promoted to a double, such as an int, because its answer is stored in a double. So we know a lot of facts about the POW method, but we don't know how its instructions are carried out. So in good object-oriented style, the implementation is hidden. We don't have a clue how to raise something to the power, to a value like that. I mean, yeah, I know how to raise something to a whole value, right? 2 to the power 3. I know to do 2 times 2 times 2. I could do that with a loop. But if it was 2 to the power of 3.5, no, I have no idea how to implement that mathematically. I could look it up, but I'm not gonna. So passing a single array element to a method. Sure, each element of the array is the same as an integer of that type. So where I have an array down here of ints, I could pass those in if I wanted to. I could do increment IA subscript 0 in subscript IA subscript 1. I typed 2 while saying 1. There we go, right? And that works just as, or no, it doesn't. The best overloaded method has some invalid arguments. What did I do? I forgot it yet again. What am I having to do with my parameters in order to get it to be taken by these functions, by these methods? The ref keyword. Ref. All right. Now it works. And the reason that works is because if it's an array of ints, then anywhere where I can use an int, like there, I could use an array element as well. Which is why earlier I could have done something like this, right? IA0++. That just adds 1 to the value of IA subscript 0. But I'm going to delete that. So see you. All right. So if you're passing an array to a method, you could pass in a 2-dimensional array like that. Or if it's a jagged array, and it's so strange that it distinguishes them by this syntax, Java certainly doesn't, then you pass it in like that. Right? You declare your jagged array with 2 square braces like that, and so that's how you would pass it. That's how you would declare the parameter variable that accepted. So writing main with a parameter list, I don't really want to cover that, and the reason why is I don't feel like finding my executable and passing in an array list. But I guess I will, just for completeness, just so that I can feel proud of myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my main and modify it to accept some command line parameters. And this is important. I can't blow it off. So I'm going to come up here to main, and it already is declared like that. So it's already written to accept some command line arguments. I could have taken that out, and it would compile and run just as well. Right? You could write the main function, the main method either way. But let's do something. We haven't actually ever done anything with these command line arguments, so why don't we just print them out? Why don't we just write our good old-fashioned print loop to print out those arrays? I mean, print out that array. Or is there not even an arrays to string class that I could call? Seems like it's nagging at me that you can't, right? Could you type array dot toString? No, that's Java. Fumbling on it. I'm just going to try printing it out. CW tab tab parentheses args in parentheses. I want to see what that looks like. If there's no arguments, what does it look like? Okay, system.string. I really thought that there was an array, a way to convert that automatically without writing the loop. Here I am spending more time looking this up than if I just written a loop. Method to convert array to string in C#. Well, I don't want to write my own method. Okay.
You write your own method. I don't think there is a built-in.
You don't think there's a built-in function? Okay, fine. Alright, let's write our own function. How are we going to do that? We already have a function for printing out integers. So come out up to here. Nah. Let's not make it more complex. Just right here. Let's write our little for loop. For, okay, yeah. My code isn't running. There it is. Yep. Okay. So instead of that, for parentheses int I equals 0, I less than args dot length parentheses in parentheses. Why is there a get length as opposed to a length? I think I looked that up last time. I don't remember. I plus plus. And let's print out I plus the value. Oh, you. Okay. Did I not see somewhere else where I had to put parentheses after length? I swear I did.
I did too.
Nope, guess not. All right.
We talked about it earlier, but
It was leaving it off.
Yeah.
Okay. So CW tab tab I plus a space quote plus args subscript I. Where did that come from? Args subscript I. Now, if it's an empty array, we're not going to see anything at all. So we might want to put a print statement above this, printing out the number of args. So above our for loop, CW tab tab args dot length space equals space end quote plus args dot length. Now what's interesting is if you're doing C++ programming, the first, you never get an empty array as your list of args. Instead, it fills it in with the name of the URL, with the name of the executable, the path to the executable. So if the path to the executable is C:\users:\jeff\t.exe, that's what the first array element is. In Java, if you don't pass in any arrays, if you don't pass in any command line arguments, you just get an empty array, an array of length 0. And the concept of an array of length 0 is kind of weird, right? But you allocated the array, but when you said, whatever, array is equal to new int, whatever, you just put 0 between the square braces. Let's run it. All right, so I did not pass any args in, so it says args dot length equals 0. I kind of remember how to change that, but I don't really know for sure. And so rather than fumble, I'm going to look up Visual Studio, C# set command line arguments. So you go to the debug tag in the project's properties window. Okay. So I'm going to right click on the project, choose properties, find the debug tab, or not. Look at it a little bit more carefully. The debug tag in the project's properties windows. We are talking about C#, are we not? Otherwise, there's a start arguments element to your C project. Well, fine. Instead of doing it like that, I'm just going to go and find the executable and call it by hand. So what I'm going to do is, as soon as I go close everything and find my code again, right click on the solution. Well, maybe it's right there. Maybe if I clicked on that one rather than the solution. Right click, properties. There it is, right? Okay. So to find it, I had to right click on that one, not that one. And then so debug, command line arguments, hello, space there. Now when I run it, I'm going to see that there are 2 arguments. Assuming that it saved that just after I typed it. Yep. Hello there. Something to note is if you put something in quotes, it's treated as one argument. The operating system handles that. If you type in something with quotes, then when you invoke the executable, anything between quotes is passed in as that argument. So it could be an entire sentence if we wanted to. So hello there, quote, 1, 2, 3, right, like that. Now these are strings, so if you had some numbers that you needed to fill in with these command line arguments, you'd have to convert them. And there we go, right? We still have 2 arguments. The first one says hello there, and the second one says 1, 2, 3. And just to prove that it's really working, I'm going to go out and find out where this directory is, open folder in File Explorer. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to copy all that text, open the command prompt, go and find my executable. So cd, now since my executable has spaces in it, I'm going to put a quote there, then paste, and then hit end quote and enter, and I'm now in that directory. And I'm curious where the executable is, so I'm going to do dir star.exe/s/b, meaning subdirectories in bare bones format. And there's my executable. Not sure why I have 2 of them. I guess I'll go into the bin directory and try to run my executable by hand. So cd bin, cd debug, and there's my executable, C_lecture t.exe. I must have typed it CS_lecture t.exe. All right. I did not give it any command line argument, so args.length is 0. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to pass in some command line arguments, like 1 and 2 and C:\users. And now we see them. That was 3 arguments, 1 and 2 and C:\users.
How did you find it?
How did I find it? What I did is, it was a convoluted process. What I did is I right-clicked on the project, chose Open Folder in File Explorer. Once I was in File Explorer, I got the path like this. I just highlighted the path and right-clicked and chose Copy. That's like step 2 of a 4-step process. Step 3 was to launch a command window, so I ran to magnifying glass and type CMD. And step 4 was to type CD, quote, edit paste, end quote, and then I was in my directory where all that was. Now honestly, when you're inside a directory, there should be another way of opening up a command window in there as well. Is it under File? Maybe that's an option you have to enable.
How to run the command prompt?
Pardon me?
Are you looking for how to run the command?
Find it.
I'm looking for how you blip into command.exe in the specified directory. And I honestly thought there was a way. I know that in the past you had to modify the registry in order to allow you to open up the command prompt in the specified directory. But I thought you could do it. Nope, because it's wanting you to use PowerShell.
No, you just have to go down into there.
And so, yeah, I could launch PowerShell and be in that directory.
Yeah.
And then I could run the executable that way. Die? No, I don't. I'm not that violent. Well, I guess I ought to learn PowerShell. Okay, let's close that. I think we're done for today. We're actually done with the with this as well. So yes, we could write a main method with a parameter list and we could learn how to parse it, but we pretty much already know. We just know that it's coming in as an array of strings, and if you needed to use those and store them as numbers instead, you'd have to convert them just like any other string input. You can make int, you can make main return a value to the operating system if you want. And if you wanted to do that, you'd have to modify the type of main. I knew that was going to close everything I tried to open. Right now main is declared as void, but I could make it int, and then I could return a value when it was done, right? Return 0. And when you're writing stuff that's going to be used for system administration, you might want to give it a return value so that your bash script or your CMD file or PowerShell or whatever you're using can execute the program and then check the return value to see if it worked or not. And so you might set it up, specify that if it returns 0, it worked correctly. And if your executable returns a non-zero value, that's an error, right? It's an easy way to do it because otherwise, you're returning 0 for success is a very common thing to do actually, so that it's really easy to check to whether it succeeded or not. And if you're writing, Unix scripts, Linux scripts, Mac scripts, whatever, then it's real easy to, Google up how to check the return value of an executable that you launch. All right. So that is done. We have already had one homework this week, albeit a fairly simple one, but I don't think that we need to assign a second one because I want people working on their projects. Also, we had already touched upon refs and outs in the past, so I do want you to remember it, but no homework on it, especially since there wasn't anything in this chapter that specified we needed to do that.
The last homework you gave us doesn't have a folder.
Oh, I'll fix that. Alrighty.